RPN, the Roddenberry Podcast Network.
This episode of Mission Log is sponsored by the Great Courses Plus. Hundreds of courses, thousands of lectures, tons of stuff you want to know. Try it for free for 1 month at thegreatcoursesplus.com/missionlog.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 289, The Circle and the Siege.
We watch an episode of Star Trek, taking it apart for messages, morals, and meanings, and seeing whether the whole thing holds up today.
And that would be the other 2/3 of the regular Mission Log opening, in keeping with our handling of the start of Season 2 of Deep Space Nine. I'm Ken Ray, by the way.
And I'm John Champion. So last week, we did The Homecoming, part 1 of the 3-part season opener. This week, we're doing the other 2 parts, The Circle and The Siege.
Yeah, because last week was the part where we said, welcome into Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. But we're not doing that this week, because we're only doing the other 2/3.
It was so long ago, I barely remember how that goes.
Yeah, not even sure what you're talking about. John's got trivia coming up in just a moment, which I can't imagine there's much, because it's only kicking off a whole new season of a relatively new Star Trek series, and there are 2 parts to it. But, we'll find out how much trivia there is in a moment. First, I'm going to tell you how to get in touch with us. Mission Log Pod is the address to find us on Facebook, Skype, and Twitter. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, we would love to hear your voice. 323-522-5641 is the phone number to call. 323-522-5641. Our email address is missionlog@roddenberry.com. Our show website, including discovered documents, is at missionlogpodcast.com. And please do remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log. And just like that, we're into some of the trivia, all of the trivia. Listen and find out.
I'm keeping it short. Because there's a lot of plot to get through here.
I will tell you, there is a whole bunch of recap coming up. So,
So strap in. If you're in traffic, oh boy, this is a good time for you to be hearing this show. Trivia for The Circle and The Siege. Now, The Circle was written by Peter Allen Fields and directed by Corey Allen. Corey Allen, of course, directed TNG's pilot episode before finishing up 4 more on that show. He directed Captive Pursuit on DS9, and he will take on just 2 more directorial jobs on DS9 before we say goodbye. The Siege was written by Michael Piller and directed by Wienrich Kolbe. And here, this makes sense. We have Wienrich coming back since he directed The Homecoming, which kicked off this arc. Hey, we go back to the Ferndale in Griffith Park. That's very exciting. Still, it's an actual location that is so pretty, it doesn't look like an actual location. And Ken, I know that you'll enjoy this bit of trivia. That scene in Kira's quarters where everybody's coming in moment after moment to say goodbye and have their take on her leaving, that's actually based on a scene in A Night at the Opera. And I don't mean the Queen album, A Night at the Opera. I mean the Marx Brothers film. And they did the master shot in one continuous take.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, in Night at the Opera, you're talking about the one where everybody comes in, and then I think Mrs. Rittenhouse or whoever Margaret Dumont was playing at that point comes and opens the door, and basically everybody just falls out into the hallway at her, right?
Right, yes.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
You know it. So good. All right, now let's talk about the Paluku. That was a toy. Literally, somebody found it at a garage sale. It was a little multi-legged robotic toy. They dressed it up with a bit of fur, and then it walked too slowly, so they sent it back to the effects guys, and they put a new motor in it to get it to scamper around a little more quickly. But they cut it pretty quick in the show, because the more you looked at it, it just looked more and more like a toy. All right, let's talk about guest stars. So, of course, we welcome back some of the major players that we have recently met. There's Philip Anglim, there's Richard Bamer, there's Frank Langella, there's Louise Fletcher, but some new faces here. Bruce Gray as Chakotay. Welcome back. Nice to meet him again for the first time. Bruce played Admiral Chakotay in this episode of DS9 prior to his appearance on TNG in Gambit Part 2, but literally only a week apart in October of 1993. So this episode had aired, and then Gambit Part 2 aired a week later. Now, credits for Bruce include Babylon 5, Starship Troopers, and Boston Legal. We will see him one more time in a very different role on Enterprise. Stephen Mock, he plays General Krim. He's one of those actors who's just been constantly working since the early 70s, even if he's not really a household name. He's got some really interesting and diverse credits. He was in the Dorothy Stratton vehicle Galaxina in 1980. He was in the cult favorite Monster Squad. He was Benedict Arnold in that awesome 1980s George Washington miniseries, the one starring Barry Bostwick. He even turns up in Babylon 5. Now, we've got him here for 2 episodes of DS9, but we would have had a lot more of him in an alternate timeline. Think back to early 1987. Stephen was a favorite to play Captain Julian Picard on some new Star Trek show. In fact, he was Dorothy Fontana's top pick, way over that British actor from Excalibur. And we have Steven Weber as Day Kanu. Now, this might be his only Trek appearance, but TV audiences definitely could recognize Steven Weber as one of the stars of the sitcom Wings that was on concurrently with DS9. Outside of that, he had been in so much. Once and Again, the 2013 version of Dallas. He had his own show for a short time called The Weber Show, and he even starred in the TV miniseries version of The Shining. He was also a regular on an underappreciated show of the 2000s, Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip.
Wow. This episode actually starts with Kira entertaining.
The continuation. Minister Jarrow and Commander Sisko are squaring off over the removal of Major Kira as liaison officer between the Bajoran Provisional Government and the Federation, and the installation of Navark Lee Nollis in her place. Diplomatically, Sisko tells Jarrow that he's full of it being hot air. Jarrow says Kira is being promoted, something Sisko doesn't believe, and that Lee isn't being kept out of the way on DS9. Rather, Bajor is entrusting the station with its greatest hero, something else Sisko doesn't believe. With Jarrow gone, Benjamin gets word that Jake wants to see him at home. The mark of the Bajoran separatist group, the Circle, has appeared on the door of Sisko's quarters. Act 1. Kira's packing to leave DS9 and the gang's all here for different reasons. Odo wants Kira to fight to stay on Deep Space Nine. Dax wants to return some skincare products and see what's happening next. Bashir has come to wish Kira his best. O'Brien says it was a pleasure to serve. And Quark had really hoped it would just be a private goodbye between the Major and the Ferengi. But the most welcome visitor is Vedic Bareil. He says things are going poorly on Bajor, with seemingly more weapons on the street today than during the Cardassian occupation. Kira wonders where the weapons are coming from, though Bareil says he tends to concentrate more on the spiritual. Speaking of which, word is you're out of a job. Want to come hang out at the monastery? It can help when the spirit gets a little bruised. Major Kira accepts his offer, then heads to Ops for one last look around. There she bumps into Lee Nollis. He apologizes, saying he didn't want this job. She says she didn't either at first, but it worked out for her. And she hopes it will for him as well. She offers him help if he needs it, and he, in turn, offers Sisko whatever help he can offer. While Sisko seems fine with Lee Nollis, he tells Major Kira that he will get her back to her post on the station. And with that, Major Kira says goodbye to Deep Space Nine. Act 2. The monastic life may not be Kira's bag. She says the relaxing practice of laying stones evenly on a path is frustrating. She confesses that she has no artistic skill and is useless at the monastery. Bareil says maybe she should explore feeling useless. There's some sort of subtext to their discussion. Romantic maybe, sexual maybe. Whatever it is seems to be heightened when Bareil tells Kira it's time. What it's time for is unclear until Bareil takes Kira inside and puts her face to face with an orb. specifically the third orb, the orb of prophecy and change. The vision it gives her is confusing. She's in the Chamber of Ministers on Bajor. They're yelling, but she can't hear them. Dax appears, dressed in a Vedic's garb. She tells Kira that she can hear them. Just listen. They hug, but when they part, Dax is Vedic Win. Behind Kira, Minister Jarrow appears, saying the ministers are calling for him. But Bareil, in military garb, appears, saying that she should not listen to Win and Jarrow. The ministers, he says, are calling for her. She says she doesn't know how to hear them, though Bareil says she does. Then Kira's naked, then Bareil's naked, then they're about to kiss, and when the vision ends. On Deep Space Nine, Odo is talking to a security friend on Bajor. Things down there are getting worse. The Circle always seems to get away, one step ahead of the authorities. Odo figures someone on high must be tipping them off. Post-call, Quark comes in, reprising his role from the first episode of Deep Space Nine. All of this is falling apart. Everyone is leaving, and he thinks it's time to get out. Odo scoffs. Because of the Circle? They're just hooligans. Though Quark says, actually, they have enough weapons and explosives to support an army. And now he's got Odo's full attention. Quark says the Circle is getting its weapons from the Krasari, which makes no sense whatsoever. The Krasari don't even have a military. But Quark says, believe it. The Krasari are supplying weapons to the Circle. Fine. Odo tells Quark to find out where the weapons are going while Odo tries to figure out where the Krasari are getting them. There's a Krasari ship coming to DS9 in 36 hours. He'll probably start there. Yeah, says Quark. Remember the part where I'm leaving? I'm leaving. So Odo gives him a choice. Either find out where the weapons are going as Odo's deputy, or be charged with impeding an investigation and be Odo's prisoner. I'm a deputy, says Quark. News of the massive numbers of weapons has Odo and Sisko thinking a coup may be on the horizon. Sisko asks Lee Nollis to check with any contacts he has in the military to see what's going on. Back on Bajor, Kira's being coy with Bareil about what the orb revealed to her. He says he actually came to DS9 to get her because the last time he encountered the third orb, she was in his vision. Wow, weird, says Kira, because you totally weren't in mine. This bit of awkward interrupted by the sound of a battle off in the distance and the arrival of Vedic Win, just as terrible as ever. In less than a minute, she pretends to not remember Kira, belittle Kira for having led a life of violence, takes Bareil to task for letting Kira see an orb without consulting the other Vedics, and suggests that Kira is there to act as Bareil's, plaything? All said with a smile and an invitation. Stay as many days as you like, Major, even as much as a week. I don't think Kira was fooled by the smile. Act 3. Commander Sisko's on Bajor to see General Krim of the Bajoran military. It's quickly established that Krim and Sisko don't see eye to eye, but Krim respects Sisko. He reasons well, even if they disagree. So what's up? Sisko wants to know why Krim is going easy on the Circle. Krim says it's difficult pitting Bajorans against Bajorans. Sisko acknowledges that, but he says the Circle is being armed by the Krasari. That's news to Krim. If Sisko hears more, Krim would like to hear it too. And Sisko agrees. Also, if he could ask Krim for a favor, Major Kira has yet to be reassigned. He'd like her back on Deep Space Nine. Krim says that's out of his hands, but interesting. You gave me information, then asked for a favor. You might have held the information as a bargaining chip to get what you want. Krim respects that, and will remember it. Back on Deep Space Nine, the Krasari ship that was coming in, it's been here for a while, being inspected by Chief O'Brien. For over 6 hours, the ship's been inspected. Dax finally tells O'Brien to release the Krasari ship, though unbeknownst to the Krasari, the shapeshifter Odo is now aboard. Back on Bajor, Commander Sisko is visiting the monastery. Specifically, he's visiting Major Kira. She's kinda mellow, though Sisko snaps her out of that. While she's been daydreaming, the battle for Bajor has ratcheted up. The Circle is planning a coup, and Sisko's not sure the military will back the provisional government. Anyway, he's got to get back to Deep Space Nine, and Kira says, yeah, so does she. Benjamin will keep working on getting her reinstated, but as soon as he's gone, Kira is abducted by the Circle. Act 4. Holy smokes, the weapons the Grisari are selling the Circle, they're coming from the Cardassians. A disguised Odo sees a weapons transaction occur on the Grisari ship. On Bajor, Kira's in the Circle's secret hideout, which is chock full of weapons, and their leader, Minister Jarrow, the one who got Kira pulled from Deep Space Nine and stuck Lee Nollis there. He acknowledges the ploy, saying the last thing he needs right now is a war hero rallying the people. Kira accuses Jarrow of subverting the government, though he doesn't see much of a government to subvert. Bajor has been powerless, first against the Cardassians, now against the Federation. It will be powerless no more. Quick question, though. When the Federation sees that Bajorans are taking over Bajor for their own sake, what will the Federation do? In the face of bribes, then threats, Kira refuses to answer. On DS9, there's concern over Kira's disappearance, but get this. Deputy Quark has done his job. He's found out where the Circle's headquarters are. Sisko, Bashir, O'Brien, and Lee Nollis are about to mount a rescue. And that's how Kira ends up back on Deep Space Nine. Act 5. Odo's back with proof the Cardassians are arming the Circle, a stolen manifest from the Grisari ship. Of course, the Bajorans don't know it's the Cardassians supplying the weapons. They think they're doing a straight-up deal with the Grisari. Lee doesn't get it. Why would the Cardassians want a stronger Bajor? But that's not what this'll get them. If the Bajorans kick out the Federation, they will be defenseless. Easy pickings for the Cardassians, who will roll straight back in. Lee has a plan. He'll call the Chamber of Ministers to let them know what's up. But communications have been blocked on Bajor. The coup has begun. Back on Bajor, Vedic Wen has come to meet with Minister Jarrow. They've come to dance. A very political dance. He's confident that he will rule Bajor, though he could use some public support. Wen says she'd be happy to support him, but she's not sure he'll be the leader. Well, he says, tell the people that the prophets are on my side, and when it comes time for the Vedics to choose a Kai, I'll be on your side. Deal. Back on DS9, 2 Bajoran assault vessels are on the way. They've given all non-Bajorans 7 hours to withdraw from the station. Starfleet hears Sisko's argument. Yes, this is a political matter internal to Bajor, but it's being backed by the Cardassians, a fact the Bajorans do not know. Maybe, but, says Starfleet, it is a political matter internal to Bajor. The Prime Directive applies. We'll figure out the politics later, but right now, time to go. Sisko will obey. Kind of. See, he wants to make sure that Starfleet leaves nothing behind, so some personnel might not make the 7-hour deadline. The conclusion. While Sisko has decided how he'll handle ignoring Starfleet's call to abandon Deep Space Nine, he won't make that call for everyone under him. But he gives a rousing speech, and they all decide to drag their heels leaving, right along with Sisko. Act 1. Families of non-Bajorans and others are being evacuated from DS9. It's sad goodbyes for friends and families, and a bit of profiteering on Quark's part. That will, of course, come back to bite him when his own brother, Rom, sells Quark's seat on the Rio Grande, leaving Quark stranded on the soon-to-be-occupied station. Kira and Lee Nollis still want to get information implicating the Cardassians to the Chamber of Ministers. Lee thinks there may be an old ship hidden from the time of the Resistance. One of the evacuation transports will drop off Kira and Dax to grab that. Act 2. The Bajoran assault vessels have arrived, finding a seemingly empty Deep Space Nine. General Krim finds the quick abandonment hard to believe. Though his first-in-command, Colonel Day, figures Minister Jarrow was correct, that Starfleet had no stomach for a fight and simply withdrew the post. Krim says that's not something he would have done. Of course, it's not something Sisko and crew would do either. Hidden, they watch as Krim and company search the station. Colonel Day calls Jarrow to tell him that they've encountered no resistance. Jarrow wants to announce the victory, though Krim advises caution. He thinks there may still be Starfleet crew on Deep Space Nine, and Lee Nollis may be there too. He's having the station scanned randomly. Jarrow stresses the importance of taking Lee Nollis alive. With his help, their victory could be sealed, while a dead Lee Nollis could break the coalition Jarrow's put together. In Jarrow's ear, Vedic Wind keeps telling him that he's a marvelous leader, and if he prevails, he says he'll direct the Council of Vedics to make her Kai the following day. Act 3. Kira and Dax found the old Resistance ship. They did that actually in Act 2, and Act 3 starts with them starting that ship. On Deep Space Nine, Krim and Day are arguing about how to proceed. Krim is still being cautious, though when power goes out on the station, the result of apparent sabotage, Day says he's sending out search parties. They're getting close. So close that Julian and his group get the drop on one of the search parties. The DS9 holdouts have taken their first Bajoran prisoners. Dax and Kira are approaching Bajor, with not much in the way of sensors, and they're being attacked. Kira leads the fight into the Bajoran atmosphere. Act 4. Out on a sabotage run, O'Brien and Lee Nollis are spotted and fired upon by one of Colonel Day's search parties. O'Brien calls for backup from Sisko. They provide cover, allowing the saboteurs to get away. Over Bajor, Kira and Dax's fight goes fine, right until it doesn't. They take out one ship, but are taken out by another and forced into a crash landing. Back on Deep Space Nine, Colonel Day catches Sisko, Bashir, and Lee Nollis in one of the holosuites in Quark's, except, no he doesn't. They were holograms, because, duh. The real Sisko radios in, though, and hits Day with a bit of truth. It's the Cardassians that have been supplying weapons to the Circle. Day says Jarrow would never deal with the Cardassians, though Sisko says Jarrow doesn't know it's the Cardassians behind the whole thing. Sisko says he'll keep Day's officers as his guests, and beams Day back to Ops. Reporting into Krim, Day straight up lies. He doesn't tell the commanding officer what Sisko told him. Meanwhile, Krim's people have gotten station sensors back online. They don't see signs of the holdouts anywhere, so they go to the one place sensors can't see, figuring they'll find Sisko and crew there. Act 5. Dax and Kira survive their crash, though Kira is really injured. Of course, Dax won't leave her behind. They'll take the evidence they have to the ministers together, though while they pause for a passing patrol, Kira loses consciousness. On DS9, Krim and company are closing in on Sisko and his people. Sisko tells Lee Nollis that he has to convince Krim that Krim has picked the wrong side. Back on Bajor, Kira comes to in quarters attended to by Vedic Bareil. She's safe, Dax is safe. In fact, here she is now, in the same Vedic robes as in Kira's encounter with the orb. Bareil will lead Kira and Dax, both disguised as Vedics, to deliver proof of Cardassian interference to the ministers. On DS9, Sisko has ordered Bashir to make some noise at Airlock 14. Bashir and his people begin an attack, and Day takes his soldiers to help in the fight. But the attackers surrender almost immediately. It was a ploy to draw Krim's guards away. Undefended, O'Brien, Lee Nollis, and others take Krim at gunpoint. In the Council of Ministers, Kira presents her proof of Cardassian interference. Jarrow tries to stop the presentation, though once she shows physical proof, the manifest that Odo stole earlier, well, that'll need to be reviewed. So says Vedic Wind. Jarrow has no choice but to agree, and the ministers all clamor for Kira's attention, very much like her vision from the orb. Back on DS9, Day is back from Airlock 14 with his prisoners, and Krim is not happy. He's heard from Lee Nollis about the message Day was supposed to deliver about Cardassian involvement. Further, word from Bajor is that the ministers are in recess while they look into the charges. Krim figures he'll have to resign. And, as what could well be his last official act, he turns control of Deep Space Nine back over to Benjamin Sisko. That doesn't sit well with Day. A member of the Circle, Bajor for the Bajorans. He draws his phaser to kill Sisko, but Lee Nollis sees the shot coming and takes the hit instead of the commander. It's not the way he would have wanted it, but Lee Nollis finally gets what he wished for. Smiling, he says to Sisko, "Off the hook after all." And with that, he's gone. Later, back in uniform, Kira mourns Lee's passing. She wants to know where they'll find someone to take his place, though Sisko says there are heroes all over Bajor. She's one of them. Kira excuses herself, and a perplexed O'Brien quizzes Sisko on why everyone reveres Lee so. Sisko tells O'Brien what he told Lee himself in The Homecoming. He's a legend. That's how history will remember him, and that's what Sisko will say anytime anyone asks. And with that, word of the Ganges return, and the families of the officers stationed there, and life starts getting back to normal on Deep Space Nine. The end.
So much plot, Ken.
So much plot, John.
You Ken has all the plot, and you did.
Yeah, and you say, why did they split it up into 3 episodes?
Yeah, right?
Wow. Yeah, it was a lot.
No, well done. Well done.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, because at one time when we talked about doing this as 3, I'm thinking like, okay, each episode gets a paragraph.
Yep.
and then we just move on from there.
No, you can't really do that, can you? Although honestly, I mean, I shortened up the stuff from the Siege because a lot of it really was military stuff. And I'm not saying that's not interesting to some people, but it's not like, oh, so what do you make of the fact that they were fooled by the holodeck or the holosuite, excuse me, which is ridiculous. That's just ridiculous. Oh, they're in a holosuite, really?
Yeah. Oh, wonder what we'll find in there. Yeah. Right.
They're just there with no weapons, nothing to fall on our heads, just 3 of them sitting there. But I'm pretty sure this is legit.
Yeah. Great, some great lines in this episode. I loved, and look, I know that I'm going to talk about Frank Langella, particularly when we get to our wrap up. But the scene between Sisko and Jaro, and Sisko says straight to Jaro's face, he was a bag of hot air, and everyone recognized him for what he was. Now, I've said from time to time that maybe Avery Brooks's acting, I feel like, is kind of inconsistent.
Yes.
Like I don't always know where he is, but there was something about watching these two together when they're just so dead serious and underplaying everything, and it's all subtext all the way, and it's great. It's great. So yeah, love that moment.
It was fantastic. Yeah.
And also then let's talk again about that very amusing scene with everybody saying goodbye to Kira. Just a lot of fun, so well directed, the overlapping dialogue. And I was really impressed to read that they did that. They did one continuous take and then did the cutaways from there. Just so nice, and not something you get a lot of on Star Trek, particularly if you go back to Next Gen. There's just line and then cut and then line and then cut. This had a lot of action in it.
It's interesting to me, actually, that you said this was sort of based on A Night at the Opera, because I don't remember that being and I haven't seen it in a while, I'll grant you. I'm much more familiar with Duck Soup, especially. That's one that I'll just watch over and over again.
Sure.
I don't remember a lot of dialogue in that scene from A Night at the Opera. It was reminiscent to me of His Girl Friday. I mean, there's a tiny bit of like in the rapid fire, in that act. Absolutely wonderful. And the conversation aboard the Resistance ship between Dax and Kira is pretty good as well. I mean, you're right. I hadn't thought about it as just being the cutaway thing. But I remember asking you last week, actually, I meant to keep track of who wrote the first one and who wrote, these, because yes, the dialogue, especially in the middle one, in the Circle, for such a heavy episode is fun a lot of times.
Well, that's what's interesting. So Ira wrote The Homecoming.
Okay.
And then Peter Allen Fields wrote The Circle. And we talk about him having, his TV career going back to the 60s. And funny enough, and I'll drop a little thing here from the Trek files, Peter Allen Fields was a lawyer. He was an attorney. And he really liked this show, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., and he went home one night and wrote a script. And I'm sorry, he actually had a contact on the show, and they said, yeah, well, if you want to take a crack at something, you can write something. He went home that night, wrote the whole script, sent it in, and they were like, no, you're not supposed to do that. But it was so good they basically worked with it as is. So this guy had this reputation of just being able to knock out a script with great dialogue and great character moments just right on the fly. So that's what he did. And then Michael Piller wrote The Siege. Now, keep in mind that even though you have one writer credit for each of those stories, this was all done in the collaborative effort of the show. So Michael Piller being EP, Ira being a producer on the show, and Peter Allen Fields being a producer on the show, they all had a lot of influence over each other's scripts. But when it came down to the final credit of who actually turned in that shooting script, well, went through a lot of hands, but it's got to come down to usually just one or two writers on the credit. So yeah, but interesting to see three different writers, even though the first and the second in particular has so much kind of crackling dialogue. And another piece of crackling dialogue, I'm so glad you pointed this out. Feel free to stay as many days as you like, even a week if necessary.
She's wonderful in how horrible she is.
Yeah.
She's just,
couldn't have said it better.
And Nurse Ratched, obviously. Mm-hmm. Louise Fletcher is a really wonderful actress. And I think you see her come on screen and you're just like, I hate her.
Yeah.
Because she plays bad characters really well.
Oh, just seething. Yeah, so good. All right. Let's say, Ken, that you're a member of the Circle. And you're walking around with a mask and you got a long red robe. Right. Look, I just have to assume that you have to beam in from one place to the other at the last second, because otherwise, like if you're walking around the Ferndale, that is a lot to deal with. Going through the woods, you got to sneak up on somebody. It's a whole thing. Well,
there are two things. First of all, I don't think they can just be beaming in because they never just beam out when they're done, right?
Yeah, right.
Like they carried Kira off. Mm-hmm, which, I mean, I don't think they would have wasted, what little transport power they had just getting there. And they're going to be like, okay, well, look, we can either beam you in and you're going to have to lug her all the way out, or you can walk there and we can beam, the four of you out. And they're like, yeah, no, I'm tired right now. But I think, picking her up is really going to jazz me or something. So we'll be able to do that. I kept wondering, what would you say if somebody stopped you? What are you guys up to? And he's like, trick or treat? Yeah. Really? Trick or treat? For UNICEF. Oh, for UNICEF. Well, then they're, the Bajor, I guess, part of UNICEF.
You're not members of the Circle, are you? No. Because I hear that they have masks and red robes and they're walking around all the time.
Yeah, these are more like crimson, though. These aren't red. Yeah. So, it's fine.
Yeah, good point. Hey, that group of people waiting around outside the shuttles to escape. Look, I know it's TV. And we have to suspend disbelief, and you condense moments, to get the right moment out of a scene. But I love how just one well-placed, impassioned speech turns him away from being an angry mob. I mean, look, good thing it's Lee Nollis. He's good, but, or at least, he has to step up to be good because he realizes that people will listen to him. But still, it's we're an angry mob. We're going to get on this shuttle. We don't care. And Lee Nollis shows up and says hey, I'm going to stay, and maybe you should stay too. Oh, you're Lee Nollis. You're right.
Here's what I'm going to say, though. I feel certain I've talked about this person on this show before. Emperor Norton, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Emperor Norton, one of the most amazing things that Emperor Norton ever did was there was a crowd of people in San Francisco, and this is back in the mid to late 1800s, a crowd of people on their way to burn down Chinatown. And Emperor Norton walked out into the street, dropped to his knees, and started praying. And guess what didn't burn down that night?
I'm going to go with Chinatown.
Yeah, go with Chinatown because that's the right answer. See, the right person at the right time. And this kind of goes back to what we were saying about Lee Nollis last week, actually. He's like, I'm no hero. I just, happen to be literally in a place at a time to do a thing. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what he was that time as well. I will say, though, I mean, there were a lot of people there and he wasn't talking that loud.
Yeah, right.
I wonder if there was somebody in the background going, what did he say about cheesemakers?
Yeah, right. And hey, and I hope you look close during that scene on the promenade because so many of our old friends there, Tracy Coco in her Koberian makeup in one shot at least, and Morn just kind of back there in the background. I kept hoping he'd just pipe up and say something, but he didn't.
He may have been the guy saying, What did he say about cheesemakers?
Right. Spider dog. Look, I got nothing here. But I just had to say spider dog, and you can eat it. So there's that.
In times of war, I mean, I don't think they're like, I don't think it's a delicacy the rest of the time, right?
They're like, boy, I like life here on DS9, but every now and then I could just really go for a little spider dog.
Yeah, you don't hear them calling for that on the replicator that much.
No, but look, while we're on the subject of food, combat rations. It's an amusing scene, though. First of all, there's a lot of dialogue anyway for people who are in hiding. But there's a lot of dialogue about those combat rations. I mean, you could, if you're an actor, try this. You could take O'Brien's whole thing as an audition monologue. He's talking about, combat rations are great, and it's timed release, and you get to eat them. And I really developed a taste for them. Also, I'm not too ashamed to admit that I have a fascination of watching rations videos on YouTube.
The fact that Kira knows that her parents were ashamed of her finger painting when she was 4 may explain a lot about the Major.
We'll go deeper into the Circle and the Siege in a moment, but first, a word from the Great Courses Plus. It's exactly what it sounds like. Great courses, covering all sorts of subjects, from health and fitness to the art of debate to understanding calculus to your deceptive mind.
So what I'm going to do, Ken, is I'm going to sit at home and watch all these great courses.
Well, John, you could sit at home and watch all these great courses if you want to. But here's what's really cool. They've actually they've added an app, so you can sit at home and watch these courses. Say bounce it to your smart TV if you've got some way to shoot it from your Android device or from your iDevice or whatever you got, an iPad, iPhone, things like that. But they've also got an app so that you can watch it on the go. Let's say you're somebody who takes the train, or let's say you're somebody who's stuck sitting someplace for a long time, or let's say you've got a commute. I like the listening portion. The Great Courses Plus, like I say, they've got an app for iOS or for Android. So instead of having to, as you say, sit at home and watch them, which you can do, you can also listen, like you listen to a podcast. So you can do that while you work. You can do that while you jog. You can do that while you drive. Basically, any place is great for a great course.
So we've told you about courses that we've already enjoyed, those by Kyle David Johnson and Neil deGrasse Tyson. Now I'm really excited about this one, too. I want to tell you about a course by someone that I'm a big fan of, Dr. Steven Novella. His course, Your Deceptive Mind, A Scientific Guide to Critical Thinking Skills, is the gold standard for learning about how we think and how not to get trapped in logical fallacies. Let's see just a few of the courses: The Neuroscience of Belief, Science and Pseudoscience, and Flaws and Fabrications of Memory. That's just a handful of the lectures in this great course. In fact, I've referred to some of Dr. Novella's concepts on Mission Log, particularly about how memory is just a construct created by the brain every time we try to remember something.
Which episode was that?
I don't remember.
24 lectures in this course, all waiting for you. But you don't have to hit them all. You can pick and choose from this course and seemingly countless others, and you can start for free. Mission Log listeners have access to 1 month of lectures from the Great Courses Plus. Just go to thegreatcoursesplus.com/missionlog. It's a lot of words, but there are a lot of big ideas that come with it, so let me say it one more time. thegreatcoursesplus.com/missionlog. Life is full of stuff you have to know. This is stuff you want to know.
One more time. Start today at thegreatcoursesplus.com/missionlog. And a huge thanks to the Great Courses Plus for sponsoring this week's show.
So this is not the first time that this question has come up, not unlike many episodes of Next Gen and a few episodes of the original series. Does Sisko have a job next week?
He straight up, Starfleet says, hey, do this thing. And he was like, yeah, okay. No,
Well, no, what he said was, okay, I will do the thing. However, I'm going to take my time doing the thing.
Mm-hmm. And then stands in there with everybody else, and he's like, so here's what I've been told to do. I'm going to drag my feet.
Right.
And how do you guys feel about this? And everybody says, oh, yeah, we're right behind you.
I like this idea. I like this flouting authority, you say. Yes, that's a great idea.
Everybody. And look, I get it that that's a very dramatic thing. Because you have to do that in a scene like that. A, I think there might be legitimate reasons for leaving. And B, I wonder about the peer pressure.
Yeah. I was actually a little bit surprised to find that this is a Prime Directive issue. Because I thought the Prime Directive really just dealt with the, pre-warp civilizations. Yeah.
I did too. And not only, we can keep taking it to each logical extreme, and you can go, okay, well, it was about pre-warp. Well, now it's about just other people's political entanglement.
Right.
Well, all right. So we might be able to say that we're not involved there, but we are involved because, look, we've been here for a while, and we've been actively helping the Bajorans do their thing. So now we're going to cut and run.
Well, except, of course, I mean, it is the Bajorans saying, you know what, nuts to this, we've had enough. I mean, let's say let's say that, Krim and company, or let's say Jarrow said, yeah, so listen, we're buying Cardassian weapons through the Kusari, and we don't know why, but we feel pretty good about it because we really want rid of the Federation. So we're just going to do this. Yeah. I mean, at that point, like, if all the cards are on the table, if Jarrow had actually come and said, I am dealing with the Cardassians, then would Benjamin have been like, oh, well, I guess you know what you're doing, it turns out.
All right.
Because was it only Jarrow's ignorance of what he was doing that made what Sisko did legit, or was what Sisko did even legit? I mean, it's the right thing to do, but he should also still lose his job, right?
Yes. Agreed. Yeah.
Not that I want him to. Don't misunderstand.
No. Of course not. Of course not.
He probably ought.
Yeah. I always say, look, therein lies that wiggle room around the Prime Directive. It's like, oh, well, it's our Prime Directive, but, there's this thing that's so right to do. See also Captain Kirk. See also Captain Picard. By the way, this is one of those few times I actually liked the Keiko and Miles O'Brien dynamic. Because I felt like there was something believable in there. There was a stake that we could actually kind of wrap our heads around. And they have a daughter, and she's saying, but us, and you're just staying behind. You don't have to. So I will cut them some slack for that. And yeah, look, there's an argument to be made. Where was she when he was doing things like flying to our Cardassian prison camp, and other missions that he might not come back from? But yeah, I mean, we got a little taste of family life there. There was something other than bickering about breakfast. Yeah. Let's talk about Jarrow a little bit. Something about him that speaks to his psychology that is at once just terrible and maybe a little too easy to understand. Sure, he's got this Bajoran pride. He has a right to be proud of Bajoran accomplishments and Bajorans as people, but he can't accept that the world has changed around him and is changing around him, and his answer to any perceived threat is to start weeding out people who aren't Bajoran enough, because it seems like that's the easiest way for him to gain power. I mean, ultimately it's all about power, but he's exploiting this idea of Bajor for Bajorans. He's defined himself by his enemies, and by definition, he thinks that everyone is an enemy who's not exactly like the narrow slice of Bajor that he has identified for himself.
Well, okay. You seem to have decided that. I'm not 100% certain where I am on Jarrow, honestly. Like, is he using racism, isolationism, whatever? I mean, is he using that fear basically to get more for himself, or does he actually believe that Bajor would be better off without anybody else, except for just Bajorans?
Yeah, it's kind of going back to the conversation about about Vedic Wen. Is she a true believer, or is she cynically exploiting the belief in order to gain power? And at a certain point, that question really just becomes academic, because they're doing what they're doing. Mm-hmm. They're building power, they're achieving power, and they may believe what they're saying, or they may not, but there's still the goal and the end is still the same.
I feel, though, like, look, I'm not saying what Jarrow is doing is correct. I don't think what Jarrow is doing is correct. And we can get into, why I don't think what he's doing is correct in a minute. But I feel like the difference between the two of them is I think Jarrow sees himself as a patriot. And what that means and whether or not and whatever we can go into, like I say. I think Vedic Wen uses religion. But I mean, everything that we've heard about the Bajoran religion is that it was peace and love, right? Yeah. And then in the hands of the prophets, when she basically bombs a school and tries to have Vedic Bareil killed, I don't think you can really say that she's a believer at that point. She actually does seem to be about attaining power. Jarrow is also about attaining power, but I can't tell if it's power for power's sake or power for the sake of Bajor. He's wrong. I mean, either way, he's wrong. But I feel like he might be a believer, not in Vedic Wen's brand of religion, but in what it is that he's doing. I don't think he just wants to see a statue of himself someplace. I think he wants to see no more Ferengi and no more humans. He feels like, well, it's as he said, he feels like the Bajorans have been, the doormat, first for the Cardassians, now for the Federations, and he's done with that. But he's so blinded by that he's not. I mean, he's not even playing checkers, let alone chess. I mean, he's looking one move ahead, and not saying that he's about to land himself in checkmate. Well, I still think that, there's an argument to be made that Vedic Wen believes in whatever version of her religion she believes in, but boy, she's found every opportunity to exploit it. And we see it here in both of them. I mean, it's something that absolutely drives me up a wall, and that's using religious language to justify any impulse, any desire, any ambition that the people here want. I mean, Jarrow, that scene, and it kicks off this series of scenes that are really, they were disturbing the more I watched them. When Jarrow says, "I feel the prophet smiling on me today," and then Wen gets into the act, and so many of those shots that follow, you start off with Jarrow doing something, and there's Wen literally right behind him, and the camera just sort of moves around enough to reveal her right behind him. Yeah. It's all political power play, because some people, and make no mistake, the Bajorans are us, just like all the aliens on Star Trek are us. They're greedy and power hungry. Jarrow saying to Wen, "Tell the people the prophets are with me." Right. It's absolutely cringeworthy, and Wen is right there, ready to enable it, but also benefit from it. Look, I've only been old enough to vote since the 90s. And honestly, I can't think of any election in my lifetime where I haven't heard some candidate describe him or herself, or has been described by someone else, as the candidate who is chosen by God. Am I wrong? Well, I mean, I don't know, because I can't remember all of them. But no, I don't think you're wrong. I'm not saying every candidate, but I'm saying any candidate, at any point in any competition, that little thing gets dropped right in at some point. It's sick, it's cynical, and I really hope that I live to see the day that it ends. Here's the problem that I'm having. So on the one hand, you're saying that you think that Vedic Wen believes on some level, but you don't think a politician can? I mean, what I had in my notes is, how about this not religious guy teaming up with this sanctimonious religious leader to take over the government? This has happened. I mean, this has happened more than once in our lives. Sure. This has happened more than once. We could name them if we wanted, all the letters. Yeah. Right. Why do we want to do that? Here's what bugs me. And well, I don't even know how to do it. I don't even know how to do this. I mean, What I kept thinking about is, I mean, there is a reason that we have norms. Somebody even said to Jero at one point, you don't like the way things are going, you work within the system to change it, right? I mean,
Kira said
that, right. Yeah. This is why we have rules and societal norms. And yes, those things do evolve, but we can't just go back on them because we want to, or we shouldn't anyway. I mean, this is what I was saying earlier. I think Jero is a patriot. I think he's a true believer in the Bajoran cause, and that does not give him the right to subvert laws and norms. I mean, obviously doing it makes Bajor weaker, and it goes again to, if it was good enough before, it should be good enough now. I mean, it goes back to the Corbomite maneuver in a way. Here's who we've said we are. Here is who we have to be. And if we need to change, then we work to change. And we talk to people about changing, right? We enact laws. We get people together. We keep an eye on what we're doing to make sure that we're going in the right direction. We don't, as Kira said to Jero, subvert. We don't just, we don't just take over. He's not even as evil as he could be, though. That's the thing.
No, but
Day is as evil as he could be, and Wynn is as evil as she could be. Jero is terrible, and what he's doing is absolutely wrong. But I mean, there was another thing that happened. No one despises the Cardassians more than me, Major, but we did learn a few things from them, including ways to encourage people to talk. Right? This is September 10th. Meet September 12th. Who are you going to be after this horrible thing? This goes back to what we were talking about in the hands of the prophets. Something terrible happens to you. Who are you going to be at that point? Are you going to be the person who deals in fear and trades in fear and gets people to do terrible things that they never would have done before because something terrible was done to them? Then you're not who you were anymore. I don't know what you're defending at that point. I don't know what you're fighting for at that point. Because just like we talked about with I can't remember if it was in the hands of the prophets or if it was in the homecoming. But I mean, at that point, it's like you said earlier. Okay, great. Now it's just Bajor for the Bajorans. Except I see you're not wearing the symbol of Vedic Wind's order. Why aren't you wearing the symbol of Vedic Wind's order? Are you sure you're Bajoran? I mean, it's not even a slippery slope. It's a 90-degree just like drop off from we're these good people to, well, at least I got mine.
Well, look, here's the thing. I don't think that true belief, or in this case, you have Wynn, you've got Jero, to whatever degree they have their beliefs, I don't think that true belief and cynical exploitation are mutually exclusive. I think those things can go hand in hand very often, and I think we see them go hand in hand very often. But yes, to your point, the further you exploit those loopholes, the further you cynically exploit the people who would actually honor those beliefs that you say that you honor, yes, the further away you get from the core of those beliefs.
Launched headlong into Season 2 of Deep Space Nine, it is time to see what we can take from the Circle and the Siege.
Two episodes today, Ken. 2 episodes, The Circle and The Siege, making up the last 2/3 of the opening of DS9 Season 2. How did we even do it, Ken? How did we even get from there to here? Well, we're here. We've landed at that place in the show where we got to wrap it all up and see if we thought it held up and what the messages and morals and meanings are. So, Ken, The Circle and The Siege, you can take them together. You could take them separately. Do they hold up?
It is like the Deep Space Nine writers had a time machine, took notes today, then went back 24 years to write it out as a warning. That's my feeling on the whole thing. So,
okay.
I mean, like as far as the ideas presented and stuff like that, I go back to what I said last week. I think with the homecoming, I would have thought, wow, this is an amazing bit of political intrigue, right? Mm-hmm. If I had watched this, if I had been watching Deep Space Nine closely when this happened, Yes, I might have seen like the possibility that somebody could use religion, whatever, but I would have thought back on it as, again, like something that we had gotten past.
Yeah.
How relevant this is today, is the only reason I'm not completely disheartened is I'm just amazed. Like how well it overlays. Also, well acted, well produced, all that stuff. What about you? Do you think it holds up? I don't know. We haven't talked about it. Maybe you don't.
And I mean, it's certainly relevant. And like I said in the last segment, I wonder if I will see a time that it is not relevant, that we look at this and go, wow, people would do that kind of thing? That's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But no, look, just taken as a piece of TV, as a production, it is well produced, it is well written, it is well acted.
Yeah.
I mentioned before how much I really appreciate Frank Langella. His understated menace is absolutely magnetic. He's incredible. And man, look, I'm glad that Minister Jaro is gone. We hope that he's gone, because, he's just terrifying. But man, how do you do a villain better than the combination of him and Vedic Wynn? He's perfect with her. She's perfect with him. It's just, disgusting how good they are at being bad.
It's so interesting to me that you call him a bad guy. I mean, I don't think he's right. I don't think he's right, but I'm not sure he's a villain. I think he's wrong.
He's the antagonist. He's the foil. He's not twirling the mustache, and he's not. Look, he's not Khan trying to kill Kirk. Of course not. He is a twisted and misguided political figure out for a power grab. Thinks he's doing the right thing, and that's a scary kind of villain to have. But yeah, I mean, he's the villain for the episode, but he's not as twisted as Vedic Wynn.
So you do think he thinks he's doing the right thing? Because I think Vedic Wynn is the villain. And while you say, "Wow, I'm glad Jaro's gone, and I hope he doesn't come back," the fact that she's still standing at the end, the fact that she's like, "Oh, here comes a bus. Time for you to be under it, Jaro." Yeah. I mean, without even missing a beat.
Yeah.
I mean, she is all behind him, as long as he's there to be behind. And the second it looks like he might falter, she's like, wow, you've got a lot of explaining to do, mister.
Terrifying, dude.
Very publicly and openly. Yeah.
Look, I'll say this about the production. Episode 2 is, episode 3. I mean, the Siege is a little more punchy. It moves a little better and obviously has more action and tension, but the setup that you get in The Circle is great. And like I said, I love that slow burn menace that we get at the end. All that stuff between Jaro and Wynn is just creep-tastic. But the cat and mouse stuff that we get in The Siege is just amusing TV because the tension is high and the action is there. I'll say that Stephen Mock, he's fine here as the Bajoran General Krim. I cannot picture him as Picard after watching this. Now, he's playing a role. I'm sure that his audition for Picard was very different, but I just can't put those two things together in my head. And it's interesting that, we get the redemption for Lee Nallis by completing his story, that the legend lives on even if the man doesn't. And there was some debate about that between Peter Allen Fields and Ira Stephen Bear. Ira felt very strongly that they needed to end his story by ending Lee Nallis. Peter Allen Fields felt like they gave short shrift to the character. So would have liked to have been a fly on the wall during that.
I mean, it wasn't necessary to keep him alive, but I mean, it's okay that he dies. I mean, had it been, hey, we got Lee Nallis, in Act 1, and in Act 5, we're saying goodbye, that would have been fairly standard. Yeah. I mean, the fact that we had him over 3 episodes, I mean, obviously not the same as having him for 2 seasons or something like that, but yeah, I mean, it would have been neat to see him. It would have been maybe neat to see him evolve, but we don't lose anything by losing him because, as you say, we did show a good arc for him.
But I'll say this about these 2 episodes, and really these 3 as a whole. this is the first time that I actually felt kind of detached from Star Trek watching these. Now, we've gone through the entire first season of DS9, and sure, in this one there was talk of the Prime Directive, but honestly, I was so wrapped up in what was happening with the Bajorans, and particularly with just my disgust with Wynn and Jarrow, that I stopped thinking about Starfleet. I stopped thinking about Boldly Going. I stopped thinking about any of that. And I was just so wrapped up in Bajoran politics and maybe the uneasy parallels to late 20th and early 21st century politics that I almost for a minute just stopped thinking about this as being part of what we've been doing for the last 6 years and what Star Trek has been doing for the last 50 years. Well, 27 years as this aired. But it just felt different to me. And not in a bad way, not in that sort of like, oh, this isn't Star Trek way, but I just sort of, that other stuff kind of went out of my mind for a moment because I was so invested in the other. And that was a strange feeling for me to have.
You kind of make me want to ask then. I mean, we go back to episodes like City on the Edge of Forever, or go back to, other episodes that are seen as classic episodes. And we have raised the question before whether they were as Star Trek as you would necessarily want them to be.
Yeah.
Or go back to Vegas a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
But is it Star Trek?
Right. No, I've been asking myself that for, the last several days as I crunch through these episodes. And I don't think I can answer that right now because, part of me says, there's something of the Star Trek formula that I'm not getting here. But if we take Star Trek and science fiction as a whole as a metaphor for us and as a way to hold up a mirror to who we are, well, like I said, the Bajorans are us. And yes, Starfleet is also us, and Sisko is also us, and trying to make a moral decision and do what's right, even when doing what's right isn't precisely in line with the rules or the orders you've been given. Yeah, this is all an examination of who we are as humans. But now we've allowed the Bajorans to hold up this sort of uglier side of the mirror to us as well and say, here's what happens when certain impulses get completely out of hand. And when we allow things like belief and drive for power and exploitation to get in the way of who we can actually be. So you might have to come back to me on this, because I could sit down and say this is really, really Star Trek, because science fiction as the metaphor for who we are now is on full display here. But I could also sit down and write an essay on how this isn't Star Trek-y Star Trek, put it in quotes, because something didn't land right with me in the experience of this.
See, here's the thing, and maybe this is the part, and this is part of the examination I think that we're doing in doing this show. I am not here to say that Deep Space Nine is not Star Trek. We are not even halfway through the whole run. I can't possibly do that. You also go back to the panel that we did in Vegas a few weeks ago. Of course, it's Star Trek because, it was made by Paramount and it says Star Trek. So, I mean, they've got deltas and they got the whole thing. And Captain Picard was even on an episode. And I think there's a Riker character that's going to be on at some point. And holy cow, I think Loxana was on an episode that I'm trying to forget. So really, Q was even here. So yes, it's Star Trek. Here's the thing. The one episode of the original series that we always had, well, not that we always had a problem with, the one that was always amazing to me, and the one that was in a lot of ways the least Star Trek, was A Private Little War. And what I've always said was it felt to me like that was Gene Roddenberry, not so much writing a story as banging on the typewriter in frustration. Yeah. Because that was a look at what was going on in Vietnam at the time. And this guy who liked to come up with ways that we could get past stuff was looking at this saying, I don't know how we get past this. And I think the problem that I'm having with this arc of episodes, and it's wonderfully acted, it's wonderfully produced, it's wonderfully written, and it says a lot that's really relevant today. The problem is Deep Space Nine is a private little war. We're not going to be able to, we don't get to the end of this and say, oh, good, because you know what? Jarrow may be in jail, but Wynn isn't. And I understand that where we live right now is a constant battle. This is one of the things that people loved about Discovery. Oh, it always seems like everything's so perfect, and I want to know how it is that we get through stuff. If you're constantly concentrating on how we're going to get through stuff, you're never going to accept the fact that you actually can, right? Is a possible concern. And so, yes, Sisko still gets to keep Deep Space Nine, but Vedic Wynn is still out there, and the Cardassians are still out there. And I'm wondering if what we just got shown is this is going to be 7 seasons of struggle. And that's not what Star Trek has been. The most struggle that Star Trek has given us is maybe 2 episodes. Holy crud, Captain Picard's a Borg now. Okay, he's not anymore, right? Yeah. And maybe that affects him, but the longest it took us to get through a problem was 2 episodes. And so you could hang your hat on the fact that if you're Starfleet, things are going to be okay. And this is the first time that we've come across Star Trek where Star Trek is not giving us that guarantee. I know it's not going to be the last time we come across it, but this is the first time where they're really saying, yeah, so you're Starfleet and that's fine when you're not here, but basically, this is the first Star Trek that has said, here in the real world, which is not what we've ever expected from Star Trek and not what we've ever gone to Star Trek for. That is FOR, not Star Trek 4, because that's the one with the whales and everything's going to be fine there.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, that's sort of where we land in this weird place because, we did a panel in Vegas called But Is It Star Trek? On Mission Log, kind of what we're doing is saying, all right, well, this is Star Trek because what we've been given is a show that has Star Trek in the title. Now, what is Star Trek trying to say? And we had 3 seasons of one show trying to say something. We had 7 seasons of another show trying to say something. We had X number of movies, and you also had, 22 episodes of an animated show trying to say something about humanity. Now we have this other Star Trek with a different name after the colon, trying to say something. And what's being said here is a lot of challenging and, might we say, bleak, disturbing, some things that are a little tough to deal with. So that said, that's my segue, by the way, that's what we call it in the business here. That segue then, what is the message here? What do we think these shows, these 2 maybe taken as we have here, or the 3 together, what are we trying to say here at the beginning of season 2 of DS9? Morals, meanings, messages, go to it.
Well, I mean, assuming we're talking about the Jarrow and Wynn part, or the Jarrow part in particular, you don't subvert the rules, you don't subvert the laws, you don't subvert the will of the people to seize power. You don't whip up fear and hatred to seize power. Might does not make right. I mean, might may be right at times. Might is, I believe, necessary. It's not always wrong, but it doesn't automatically make you right. And the one other one that I got is you have to look a gift horse in the mouth. We joked about this forever ago. When that phrase was a phrase, you don't look a gift horse in the mouth. That's because if there was something wrong with the horse, you could shoot it legally. You could shoot it and leave it wherever you shot it. Because, we're talking about a phrase that came up in the 16, 17, 1800s maybe. We live in a world now where you have to look a gift horse in the mouth, right? You can't say, oh, they just happen to have weapons that I just happen to know about and just happen to be able to afford. What an unbelievable amount of coincidence and luck. Yes, I will absolutely throw in with you having absolutely no idea whether or not, how this is happening. But boy, what a fortunate person am I. I mean, you have to look more than, one step away. If somebody calls you and tells you they're going to make you rich and all you have to do is give them your bank number, you have to investigate that a tiny bit. If somebody comes to you and says, I'm going to make everything better for you, and all you have to do is, you have to do a tiny bit of due diligence, because otherwise you could be turning your planet over to reptilian creatures or, something worse, believe it or not. What about you, John? What messages did you pick up?
Yeah, well, look, there are some kind of less serious ones in there as well. I like Vedic Bareil telling Kira, be useless for a moment. I don't know, just a nice moment for her to step outside of herself and her constant drive to do something and just actually be in herself and be useless for a moment. It's okay. It's all right. There's a lot of kind of classic Star Trek being stronger together messaging in this episode. Even Jake and Nog have that moment to really drive it home, to say, hey, look, there's all this other stuff happening out there, but at the end of the day, we're people. We're friends who connect because we're friends, regardless of the politics and what other people are telling us. So that it was nice to humanize that, or human and Ferengaize that in a moment. Similar to your, I'm getting more serious as this goes. Similar to your talk about looking gift horse in the mouth because you have to. Yeah, question your leader's motivations. That's fine. That's absolutely fine and is necessary and should be done. And then, at the end of this, at the end of the 3-episode arc, not really a message necessarily, but at the end, Sisko is firmly on the side of protecting Lee Nalis's legend, which is interesting because he doesn't really have to do that. Lee did something heroic in the end. I had to wonder, though, given enough time, will the history books dig a little deeper and talk to the people who knew the truth? But at least in this case, at the end of this episode, we end it with Sisko making sure that Miles O'Brien knows, and then we, the audience, know that the truth, in quotes, is more important than the truth with a capital T. And I think that's one of the themes being explored in this episode throughout. And because it is, I like that we gave Lee that moment of redemption at the end, because he actually got to live up to being that guy that people believed he was, even though he didn't feel like he was.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. Executive producer Rod Roddenberry. You know about all the podcasts on the Roddenberry Podcast Network, don't you? What? You don't? Podcast.roddenberry.com. That'll clue you in. If you'd like to support Mission Log directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog. For more exciting Star Trek podcasts, check out Trek FM, that is trek.fm. And for the latest in Star Trek news and discussion, be sure to visit trekmovie.com.
Next week, invasive procedures.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. Next week's episode, Invasive Procedures. That sounds like Star Trek. After the colon. End transmission.
Podcast.roddenberry.com, the Roddenberry Podcast Network.